Today is the 17th of 2018. So, in answer to the question, why do we have so many more black-legged ticks here than we used to, 4 out of 6 tables say probably because there are more deer. One table specifically mentions, actually no, 2 tables. 2 tables said that they could be coming in with other animals. One table said, people move here from New England and from the east, and they're moving this direction, and they're bringing those ticks with them, possibly. Another group said, maybe. Okay, so, one group specifically said maybe hosts are on the move, like mice are on the move, or maybe we've got deer coming from other states moving east, or moving west, rather. And another said, maybe people are bringing them. Because people, like, somebody moves here from New Hampshire, they bring their livestock, or they bring their dogs, or they bring whatever, and maybe there are ticks on them. So here's the short answer, we're not sure. You probably could have seen that coming. The two leading hypotheses on this are increase in deer population, better food source for the ticks. The other leading hypothesis is climate change. So climate change has expanded the range of a lot of insects that carry diseases, a lot of insect vectors for disease like mosquitoes. And climate change also seems to be expanding where these ticks can live and how early that they can be active and how late they can be active. We have earlier springs and later winters in the last 20 years. It's been a pretty noticeable change. And so the two leading hypotheses on these, and they could both be working together. We have a bigger deer population. We also have a warming environment. The climate has changed. And as the climate changes, range maps for a lot of species get adjusted. So there may be other reasons. And there's actually some interesting research on the effect of increased deer populations on increased tick populations. I'm trying to find the original study because what I got was a translation, and it's from a Norwegian university. And I really think that their original research has to be better than the translation because the translation doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm trying to find a way to actually understand what they're saying. But those are, so, a lot of you came up with one of the primary hypotheses, which is increase in the host population. So short answer, we don't really know. But now, let's talk about something we know a little bit more about, shall we? Mises! Mises! Specifically, the little white-footed mouse. Peromyscus leucopus? Leucopus? It's native. This is our critter. These are notes. It's found in most of the eastern U.S., and there are tons of them. If you want to observe these guys in the wild, all you have to do is take an old sheet of corrugated roofing, corrugated metal of some sort, lay it on some nice tall grass near a wood pile, and I can pretty well guarantee you that if you check that thing every couple weeks, within a month minimum, especially in the fall, you will find a big ball of grass under there, which is a mouse nest. Because that's a nice hiding place for them. They'll take it. There are so many of them, we have no way of estimating how many of them there are. It's like estimating the number of mosquitoes in the state of Ohio. We can't do it. There are incalculable numbers of them. Lots of them. And they are really important ecologically. Now, it's the kind of important ecologically that nobody wants to be. They're important as a food source. Coyotes eat them, and foxes eat them, and owls eat them, and weasels eat them, and snakes eat them. You can probably name a few other things that eat them. There are any number of things that would like to eat a delicious, juicy little mouse. You have to eat a lot of them because they are small, but crunchy, tasty. So they're really ecologically important in that way. I've never eaten a mouse, for the record. Just thought I would establish that. I thought about doing it once in the name of science, but I didn't in the end. They're also actually ecologically important because they do something They spread seeds. They spread seeds that are so tiny that you've probably never even thought about them. Because they're not really truly seeds, they're spores. And this picture right here, that's two different plots of grass. And this plot of grass looks significantly healthier and happier and greener and brighter and taller than this one, which really looks pretty pathetic. And they're growing in identical soil. Below ground, what difference do you see? All that white stuff. That white stuff is fungus. Who here has touched a fungus? Mushrooms on pizza count. Mold on bread. If you ever found a moldy piece of bread in the fridge and you poked it, if you poke it, you see little things puff up. Those are spores. We could grow some bread mold in here. What the heck, it'd be fun. All we need is, it's cheap to start. Bread in a Ziploc bag will do it. There are fungus that grow on the roots of other plants. Trees, grasses, and they're called mycorrhizal fungus. And here's what they do. Who here has ever seen a mama bird feed baby birds, just on video or anything else? They sort of chew up the food and then they spit it in the baby's mouth. Aw, ew. Same thing most carnivores do. Wolves and coyotes will actually eat a bunch of food. They will wolf down their food and then bring it back to the babies and vomit it up for them. It's called predigestion. Ew. So sweet. Mycorrhizal fungus kind of do the same thing. They take soil nutrients and they make them available to the plants. Oh, guess why this grass looks so nice? It's getting its food pre-digested for it. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's pretty good. So basically, this grass is getting more nutrients than this grass because of all this white stuff. You can actually, if you go into the great giant forests of the Pacific Northwest, where you have trees that are 400 feet tall, these enormous, gigantic Douglas firs and ponderosa pines, those gigantic, enormous trees, if you remove the little fungus that's growing on their roots, will die. When you clear cut a forest repeatedly, if the soil gets baked sufficiently to kill all the fungus in the soil, that area will eventually no longer grow trees or not grow a healthy population of trees because they require those little tiny fungus. It's what's called a symbiotic relationship. We'll talk a whole lot more about them later. But those little tiny thread-looking things support giant plants, support forests, support whole ecosystems. And guess who spreads their spores? Aww, Peromyscus leucopus, our little white-footed mouse. Because they eat little bits of those fungi and they spread the spores around, they carry them on their paws, so they actually spread these fungus that help the bigger plants. So they are really important. Aw, I feel differently about them now. Don't worry, we're going to ruin it all in just a little bit. So this is good. They do good things. Do you remember, I mentioned this the other day, the question that I always hated as a naturalist. Well, what's the purpose of blah, blah, blah? Well, what's the purpose of poison ivy? To make more poison ivy. What's the purpose of black-legged ticks? To make more black-legged ticks. What's the purpose of white-footed mice? To make more white-footed mice. You know, they do good stuff. They're important ecologically. They're an important piece of this big puzzle. They're food. They're an important food source, and they spread these fungi around. That's great. But it's not their purpose. They don't wake up every morning and think, today I will become food for a coyote. Yep, I'm going to fulfill my purpose. Nah! They think, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to reproduce. I'm going to try to get enough calories. I'm going to not die, and maybe I will have babies and they will not die. Cool! It's their whole thing. It's their gig, as it were. Okay, so they are ecologically important. speaking of that whole having babies and not dying thing, let's talk about the having babies part. Let's talk about the having babies. Aww. Babies! The white-footed mice, Peromyscus leucopus. Reproduction. Females mate with multiple males, males mate with multiple females. Everybody mates with everybody else. It is known as polygynandrous. It's also known as promiscuous. I am not kidding, that is a biological term on this one. Everybody mates with everybody else. All they can. Doing it like mice. Every moment that it's available with every other mouse they find. It's how they make more mice. And that really is their purpose. So, females can reproduce when they're between 40 and 45 days of age. Days. So a little over a month, she is ready to have babies. Gestation, that is pregnancy. Gestation lasts anywhere from 22 to 28 days. And there's an asterisk there. We're going to talk a little bit about what this delayed implantation means. What this really means is that you can go from having 2 mice to having a couple thousand mice in 6 months. So let me tell you about my friend Sally and her little accident. She had 3 mice. So do you know how you tell a boy mouse from a girl mouse? Look for the little bow on the head. That was a joke. They don't have bows on their head. These are tiny little organisms. So everybody take your hands and hold them about like that. You're looking at something whose body is about like that. And you know how tiny their genitals are? As far as I know, their genitals are pretty well hidden in a lot of rodent species. Well, when they get older, the male's testicles get pretty big, and you can see them kind of dragging along behind them, and then you can tell. But in males that have small testicles or males that are pretty young, their testicles aren't gigantic. Yes, I've said testicles like 4 times. Because this is biology, we can do that. We're about to say a whole lot more stuff. So in young males, it's hard to tell, because, I mean, seriously, in really, really mature males, their testicles are like the size of their head. They drag along behind them. It's actually kind of gross. But in young males, they're not that visible. So my friend Sally had 3 mice, and she was pretty sure that she had 2 females and a male. Because the one guy, you could see, clearly had testicles. Okay, this is a boy. He got his own cage. Because you can't leave 2 males together because they can fight and kill one another. And you don't want to leave a male and a female together because they will not fight and kill one another. They will make love, not war. Well, it turned out the one that she thought was a female was actually a male. He just didn't have really big testicles yet. But he had enough sperm to impregnate the female. So she went from 3 mice to suddenly, oh my God, that one's pregnant, to, oh my God, she just had 12 babies. So if you're keeping count, that goes from 3 to 15. And so, you know, adult mice are like this size and the babies are this size, and the female can get pregnant at about 40 days of age, and the males can impregnate at like 4 weeks of age. And so you're frantically trying to separate the males and the females, so she's frantically buying like old fish tanks at Goodwill because she now needs to have a whole room devoted to mice. So she thinks she has them separated. Okay, good. I think this is all the females, and then I've got 4 tanks because I think I got all the male babies out of there. Can you guess what happened next? Yeah. Within about 4 months, she had more mice than she could count. She was in the hundreds. Because you can't figure out which are all the males. I mean, it's mind-numbing, and you're trying to get all the males in their own cages and get all the females separated, and invariably there would be 1 male in a cage with 10 females who were correctly identified, which means that all 10 females are now pregnant, which means 22 days later, oh my God, they all had 10 babies. That's 100 babies. Oh my God, I have to separate all the males. Do you want to know what she ended up doing with them? She found a snake breeder. Snake breeder was very happy to take them all off her hands.
I wonder why.
crunch, crunch, crunch. So anyway, actually they don't even crunch, they just go, but long story short, mice can go from a couple to an insane number that you cannot control. Oh my God, they had babies again! Hundreds, possibly thousands. She was really happy to find the snake breeder. At that point, she had stopped caring about the mice. She was done caring. She could not care anymore. So they can do that thing, which is kind of a superpower, I guess, if you don't have them all in your house, in tanks in the spare bedroom that you used to have as a spare bedroom that's now a mouse room. Oh my God, they had babies again. Don't tell her. She can't take it. She'll cry. Yeah, that's called exponential growth. You've seen an exponential curve in math. Have you seen that? Looks like that. Woo! Mice can do that. They do math. They multiply very, very efficiently. See, that was pretty clever, wasn't it? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about when things are not so good. So the mice in my friend Sally's spare room / mouse room were getting fed every day. Every day, bless her heart, until she stopped caring, Sally went in and she made sure they all had clean water and she made sure they all had food, checked for more babies that had happened overnight, because there was a while where it was seriously like every couple days she was finding a new litter of babies. Can you imagine? Life was pretty good for them. They didn't have any predators. Well, until she found the snake guy. But there were no predators in the house. There were no foxes stalking them. They were getting enough calories. They weren't going to freeze to death. They were in a nice, warm, spare bedroom. So male and female mate. You understand the basics of sexual reproduction, I believe, at this age. Sperm meets eggs. If I'm surprising any of you, I can point you to some resources. Sperm meets eggs. Eggs are fertilized. Is that a baby? What has to happen before that actually is going to go someplace? Let me draw you a uterus. Here's a uterus. There's the little opening. Now, in the case of mice, there are multiple eggs at once. And actually, let's make this even better. Let's draw little fallopian tubes. So there are the ovaries, there are the fallopian tubes. This is pretty much the same as in humans because guess what? We're all mammals. And in mammals, reproduction is pretty darn similar. So we've got this sort of lopsided uterus. I don't really know what a mouse uterus looks like, and I didn't want to steal human symmetry for this. We've got ovaries. The ovaries pop out a bunch of little eggs. The eggs head down into the uterus. We'll make the sperm little dashes. If they get fertilized, and we'll make them look like that. So the little fertilized eggs are these sort of darker red. If they are fertilized and they get to here, what has to happen before those are going to become babies? They have to do something. Anybody here ever plant beans in the garden? Carrots, tomatoes, anything you plant from seed? Can you just let it germinate and then like sort of stick it on a hard cement surface and it grows into a bean plant? It's got to be implanted in something. So the nice thing about the mammal uterus, it's got this big, fat, thick layer of nutrients. It's blood. And these little fertilized eggs have to burrow down into there and do what's called implant. Okay? If they do not implant, no babies. If they do not implant, all of this lining gets shed. Bloody discharge. In human females, that's the menstrual cycle. In other mammals who have a different reproductive setup, it's a little different. But in all mammals, those fertilized eggs have to dig into something. They have to basically find garden soil, which is that uterine lining. What's really interesting is that mice can control implantation. Whoa. Humans do not have this ability. Some mammals do, though. Bats have this ability. Mice have this ability. I'd have to find a list of other organisms that have the ability to delay implantation. So basically, little Miss Mouse, the one with the bow on her head, mates. And remember, she's going to mate with a bunch of males. He's going to mate with a bunch of females. So there is sperm from multiple males swimming about in here. And all of those fertilized eggs may actually have different fathers. It gives her the best chance to get her genes passed on because one of those guys has got to have good genes. Not sure who, just going to mate with them all just in case. And he is assuming that at least one of these females must be a good mother who will raise some of my offspring, I mean my genes, and let them survive, so I'm just going to mate with all of them just in case. If conditions are not good, if she's on the verge of starving, if she's terrified, if she has found herself in the middle of a fox den, if she's freezing to death, if it's 0 degrees and she is, and the nice little straw nest that she built herself under that sheet of corrugated stuff that you left next to the wood pile, you took up, somebody came along and cleaned up and took it up and broke up her nest, she will actually hold on to those fertilized eggs and not let them implant. What? There's a time limit. There is a time limit on this. And that's why, if you look at this, gestation can be 22 to 28 days. If they implant immediately after mating, about 22 days later, she's going to have babies. If she holds on to them for, I guess it's about up to a week, and then conditions are right and they do implant, you're looking at closer to 28 days, possibly up to 30. Because you're adding that time where the fertilized eggs are just kind of hanging out in there. Now, I don't think this is like a conscious thing. I don't think tiny female mouse are running around going, not yet, not yet, not yet, okay, now. I don't think that's happening. But there are biological mechanisms where her body basically says, hey, time's not right yet, don't do it. Now, if you get past about a week and conditions haven't improved, those eggs are not going to implant. And she's just going to lose that lining, lose the fertilized eggs. The body, in a lot of mammals, the body will actually just reabsorb that lining because it's nutrients. And if she's close to starving anyway, her body needs them. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Reproduction in mammals is not all one size fits all. But, they do this with some complicating factors. So far, everything we know about mice is pretty cool. They're ecologically important. Whoops. They're a food source. Yay! Coyotes like to eat them. Crunch, crunch. They spread symbiotic fungus. Yay! They help trees grow. They can do amazing magic tricks by retaining fertilized eggs and not letting them implant. Wow! Is there any drawback? Is there any drawback to white-footed mice? Who can think of one, other than the fact that if they get in your house, they're going to pee all over your counters? Disease. Disease, you say? Well, it just so happens that the white-footed mouse is also the primary host of the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. Oh. Well, that's kind of a problem. That's not good. So when we say they are the primary host, this is where this bacteria sort of grows up. So the bacteria becomes mature and is ready to reproduce in the bloodstream of the white mice. So that's what we call a primary host. And the bacteria live in the bloodstream of the white mice. So these little white mice are very often a reservoir of this bacteria. They're a holding tank, in essence, for this bacteria. So I have questions about this. And these, remember, they are feeding on the mice when they're larvae. So that's the tiniest little life stage of the tick. That's the one that's about that size, if not smaller. And I actually found a picture. I meant to put it in here. I'll have to find it. It showed a young white-footed mouse, and you could see all these little spots in its ears, and they were larval ticks that were all embedded in its ears, feeding on its blood. And they are there picking up that bacteria from the mouse, and then, of course, they're going to harbor that bacteria in their bloodstream and possibly transmit it to a larger animal when they feed as nymphs or as adults. I got a couple of questions about this, and you might too. So, interestingly enough, white-footed mice don't really seem to suffer from having these bacteria in their bloodstream. Yes, that's okay, good. I'm seeing lots of crinkled brows, because I don't get that. I don't get that at all. And I also don't get where do the bacteria start? It's kind of like which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do the mice have the bacteria first and they give it to the ticks? I mean, because those little ticks are hatched clean. They are disease-free. The mother tick cannot transmit the bacteria to the eggs. So those little ticks come out, they have no disease. They get it from the mice, but where did the mice get it? Did they get it from larger ticks? Are they born with it? Do their mothers pass on that bacteria in their breast milk? Mammals, I mean, little white-footed mice, they're mammals. Their mamas nurse them. I also forgot to put some pictures of little nursing mice mamas. They're adorable. They're so cute. I would feel compassionate towards them, too, if I didn't know what I know. But, yeah, I mean, they're huge vectors of a lot of diseases. We just happen to be talking about this one. But, yeah, I got questions about sort of which came first, the bacteria or the tick. Which came first, the bacteria or the mouse? How the heck do they survive with this bacteria in their bloodstreams and not seem to be affected by it? I mean, if you've known somebody with Lyme disease, people with Lyme disease suffer. It's pretty miserable. It can be pretty torturous. I've known a couple people who've had late-stage Lyme, you know, and it's bad. How do these little teeny tiny mice do just fine? Now, they don't have a real long lifespan. Let's be clear about that. A wild white-footed mouse is probably lucky to live, they probably don't live a year. I doubt many of them see their first birthday. You know, they might live 7 to 10 months. You have to look up actual lifespan information. But, yeah, I got questions. Do you have questions about these guys? There's my first big question. How can white-footed mice tolerate having this bacteria in their bloodstream? What are other questions you have?